Wall Street, a cold, rainy afternoon in December. In the heart of New York's financial district, a young man with no Ivy League degree, no connections, and no wealth stood alone, holding a worn-out umbrella and a dream. And then, a small act of kindness, offering shelter to a stranger in the rain, changed everything. But kindness was just the beginning. What followed were ruthless tests, humiliation, prejudice, sabotage, and the kind of rejection that breaks most people. Can someone with nothing but grit and heart survive in a world ruled by privilege? You're about to find out. New York, Wall Street, a gloomy December afternoon. The rain poured relentlessly, each heavy drop striking the pavement, blending into the frantic rush of people racing against time. On Wall Street, no one stopped. No one looked at anyone else. Here, time was money, kindness was a luxury, and those who lagged behind were left in the dust. Marcus Carter stood under the awning, gripping the handle of his worn-out umbrella. On his phone screen is a list of top financial firms: Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan. All had rejected his applications. A fresh graduate from an unknown university, with no connections, no powerful backing, he had nothing but sheer determination. Across the street, a middle-aged man was hunched under another awning, his dark shirt soaked from the downpour. No umbrella, no luxurious coat. His once polished shoes were now stained with water, leaving darkened streaks across the leather. People rushed past him without a glance, as if he didn't exist. Marcus watched for a moment, then, without hesitation, he crossed the street. "Want to share some cover?" His voice was casual as he raised his umbrella slightly. "I've got room, and I'm guessing you don't want to stand there all day." The man looked up, his sharp gray eyes flickering with a brief moment of surprise. He glanced at Marcus, then at the umbrella, as if debating whether to accept the gesture. Finally, a faint smile appeared, subtle but unmistakable. "Thank you, really," he said, his voice rough, tinged with exhaustion from the long day. Marcus nodded, saying nothing more. To him, helping someone in need wasn't something to think twice about. It was just the right thing to do. The man shivered slightly, pulling his collar up in a futile attempt to ward off the cold. Exhaling a slow breath, he stared off into the distance, as if speaking more to himself than to Marcus. "This morning the sky was clear, the sun was shining. I thought there was no need to carry an umbrella." He let out a small chuckle, shaking his head. And then, just a few hours later, the rain comes pouring down. The weather changes so fast. He paused, then turned to look at Marcus, his eyes carrying a deeper meaning. "Just like people." Marcus chuckled lightly, not out of mockery, but out of understanding. "Sounds like you've seen that happen quite a few times." The man shrugged, rubbing his hands together for warmth. "Who here hasn't?" They stood there for a few quiet moments, the only sound around them being the steady patter of raindrops. Finally, the man spoke again, his voice calm but observant. "What are you doing here?" Marcus took a deep breath. He debated how much to say, but then decided there was no point in holding back. "Looking for a job." The man tilted his head slightly, encouraging him to continue. Marcus smirked, his tone laced with honesty. "Graduated college, not Ivy League, no connections. No one even reads my resume. They want people with family money or at least a prestigious name. I have neither. But I'm good with numbers. I work hard, and I know that if someone just gave me a chance, I wouldn't let them down." The man nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing slightly in thought. "So you've been sending out applications everywhere?" Marcus let out a short laugh. "Yeah, and all I get back are rejection emails." The man listened, not interrupting. When Marcus finished, he glanced up at the towering building behind him and spoke, his voice carrying no hint of arrogance. "Come to Sterling and Company tomorrow morning. Mention my name, Richard Sterling." Marcus blinked. 1 second. 2. Then the realization hit him like a jolt. Richard Sterling, CEO of Sterling and Company, one of the largest brokerage firms on Wall Street. He opened his mouth, then hesitated, his brows furrowing. His voice dropped slightly. "Why are you helping me?" Richard studied him for a long moment, his faint smile fading into something more thoughtful. Because you helped me without thinking twice. It was an instinct, a reflex to help someone in need. He paused before continuing. I'm not dressed in a fancy suit. I'm not stepping out of an expensive car. From the outside, I'm no one important. Yet you still chose to help me simply because you thought it was the right thing to do. And I believe it's only fair to give you a chance in return. Marcus clenched his jaw slightly, a strange unease settling in his chest. Part of him wanted to believe this was just a stroke of luck, but another part, he shook his head, his voice firm. I don't need anyone's pity. Richard wasn't surprised by the response. Instead, he smiled, his gaze steady and knowing. If you're too rigid with yourself and too worried about what others think, you'll have a hard time finding your place in this world. He tilted his head slightly. Didn't you just help me without expecting anything in return? So why is it so hard for you to accept the same from someone else? Marcus didn't answer immediately. He felt the weight of Richard's words, but there was still something inside him that resisted. Richard watched him for a moment longer, then nodded. You helped me, and now I'll help you. The rain kept falling, but for the first time in a long while, Marcus felt like the sun might be shining somewhere in the distance. Marcus stepped into the towering building of Sterling and Company, where bright white lights cascaded down from modern chandeliers, reflecting off the polished marble floors. He looked up, feeling as though he had just entered an entirely different world. People in expensive suits moved swiftly, conversations filling the hallways, each carrying a sense of urgency and purpose. A part of him still couldn't believe he was really here, inside one of Wall Street's leading brokerage firms. From a man with no connections and no prestigious background, he now stood at the heart of the financial world. He clenched his fists, reminding himself, I will do well. This is my chance to prove myself. He had no Ivy League degree, no wealthy family to back him, but he had diligence, determination, and an unbreakable spirit. As he approached the reception desk, a well-dressed receptionist greeted him with a professional smile. Good morning. Are you Marcus Carter? Yes, that's me, Marcus replied, trying to mask his nervousness. She nodded and gestured for him to follow. I'll take you to the intern workspace. Marcus followed her through the vast hallways, where the relentless pace of the office became apparent. Brokers darted past each other, phones pressed tightly to their ears, their voices sharp as they gave rapid trade orders. Large electronic screens displayed fluctuating numbers, signaling constant market shifts. In one corner of the office, a young broker slammed his fist onto his desk, muttering a curse under his breath as a trade went south. In another area, a small group huddled together, engaged in a heated discussion over a chart full of complex figures. People here weren't just working, they were fighting. Marcus quickly realized there was no room for hesitation or mistakes. Everyone was battling for their position, for a chance to stay. This wasn't just a job, this was a war zone. They stepped into the elevator. When the doors opened on a high floor, Marcus followed her through long hallways, where the hum of ringing phones, keyboard clicks, and rapidly changing financial charts never ceased. Outside a large trading room, two middle-aged men were arguing over a stock deal. One gestured furiously. I told you, don't place that order until we have confirmation from the bank. Marcus swallowed hard. This atmosphere was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Finally, they arrived at a spacious but simple room where the interns had gathered. Marcus scanned the room. Everyone was young, well-dressed, exuding confidence. A few people smiled and nodded as he entered. A friendly-looking guy with brown hair extended his hand. I'm Jake Patterson, intern from Wharton. Nice to meet you. Marcus shook his hand, relieved to be greeted. The other interns introduced themselves, Harvard, Columbia, Yale, all from elite schools. When Marcus said his name, some nodded, but others exchanged skeptical glances. Someone whispered, Carter? Never heard that name before. Another shrugged, eyes scrutinizing him. Not everyone here is elite. Marcus didn't react. He was used to being underestimated. Suddenly, a sharp voice cut through the air. All right, enough with the pointless introductions. The room fell silent. Marcus turned to see a stern-looking, middle-aged man enter. His glasses sat precisely on the bridge of his nose, making his scrutinizing gaze even sharper. He was a man whose suit was so impeccably tailored, it seemed rigid, his slick-back hair perfectly in place. His face bore an air of arrogance, his eyes filled with judgment. Collins was the type who made no effort to hide his condescension, even in the way he stood, arms crossed, his expression permanently one of disdain toward anyone who didn't meet his standards. Andrew Collins, internship manager, he introduced himself in a flat but unmistakably disapproving tone. I don't recall seeing your name on the list of top candidates we recruited, Collins said, his voice drawn out with sarcasm. Perhaps I overlooked it, though I highly doubt that. Some interns exchanged looks. A few smirked, but quickly fell silent as Collins glanced their way. Marcus remained composed, though he could feel the hostility radiating from the man. I believe I can learn and contribute if given the opportunity, sir, Marcus replied, his voice steady. Collins scoffed. Oh, I'm sure you believe that. But this isn't a classroom, Carter. This is Wall Street, and I don't have time for dreamers. Emily raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms. Come on, Andrew. At least give him a chance. Everyone has to start somewhere. Collins sneered, glancing at Emily. Opportunities aren't given, Emily. We're here to weed out the weak. I don't think Carter will last very long. Marcus met his gaze, his voice unwavering. I'm not a dreamer, sir. I'm here to learn and work hard. Collins smirked. We'll see about that. But don't expect anyone to help you. Here, only results matter. The room felt colder. A few interns cast sympathetic glances at Marcus, but none dared to speak. Collins studied him for a moment before tossing a thick folder onto the table. All right, if you want to prove you belong here, start now. Collins folded his arms and smirked. Your task is to analyze these stocks, find any opportunity to make money, and present your findings by the end of the week. Marcus frowned. These ghost stocks had almost no data. This was nearly an impossible task. Collins leaned in, lowering his voice in a taunting manner. Or you can pack up and leave right now. A few interns exchanged uneasy glances. Everyone knew this was an unfair challenge. Jake subtly shook his head, as if to say, don't do it. But Marcus clenched his fists. He was not a quitter. He nodded, eyes locked on Collins. All right, I'll do it. Collins raised an eyebrow, then let out a small chuckle. Let's see how far you can go. Marcus didn't reply. He only knew one thing. This was going to be the toughest battle of his life. Marcus opened the file on his desk, a long list of nearly inactive stocks, long forgotten by the market. Collins folded his arms again, smirking. Your job is to analyze these, identify any possible profit opportunities, and present them at the end of the week. Marcus frowned. He had only 7 days to complete a task that even a seasoned broker would need a month to tackle. He looked up at Collins. Can I use the firm's internal data to support my research? Collins sneered. Of course not. If you think you're as good as you say, figure it out yourself. A few interns chuckled under their breath as Collins took a step closer, gazing down at Marcus with an amused, almost cruel expression. Or are you looking for special treatment? Do you think this is a place where sympathy gets you ahead? A scoff came from Nathan, Collins' loyal assistant. Marcus clenched his jaw. He knew this wasn't a test of skill. It was a deliberate move to eliminate him. Or you can pack up and leave right now, Collins repeated, voice laced with challenge. Jake shook his head slightly, signaling Marcus to back down. But Marcus simply tightened his grip. He wasn't about to give up. He nodded firmly, keeping his gaze on Collins. All right, I'll get it done. Collins arched an eyebrow before chuckling. Let's see how long you last. Marcus spent the entire morning trying to begin his work. But less than an hour later, another intern, Nathan, Collins' assistant, approached his desk. Carter, Mr. Collins wants you to get him a coffee. Marcus looked up. A coffee? Nathan shrugged. Americano? No sugar, no milk, just the right temperature. Not too hot. And hurry up. Don't waste time. A few interns smirked mockingly. Marcus clenched his fists. This was not the job of a financial intern. He glanced around. No one else had been assigned such a task. Jake gave him a quiet, sympathetic look. Emily frowned slightly. but no one spoke up. Marcus took a deep breath. He knew exactly what was happening. Collins was testing his patience. He stood up, grabbed his coat, and walked out. 15 minutes later, he returned with a steaming cup of coffee and placed it on Collins's desk. Collins picked up the cup, took a sip, and shrugged. 2 minutes late. Not surprising. I guess speed isn't your strong suit. A quiet round of snickers echoed across the room. Marcus remained silent. He knew there was no way to satisfy this man, but it didn't stop there. The next day, Marcus was sent to make photocopies. The following day, he was ordered to carry files from the top floor to the conference room, a job meant for administrative staff. After that, he was assigned to arrange meeting tables and prepare water for executive conferences. Collins stood by the door, watching him, enjoying every second of Marcus being reduced to a nobody in the firm. Feeling honored, Carter. Work hard. Maybe one day you'll actually be worth something. Some interns remained silent, but they all knew exactly what Collins was doing. A financial internship? Absolutely not. His real work, analyzing the ghost stocks, was pushed to the bottom of his priorities. Every time he tried to sit down and get started, Nathan or Collins appeared with another pointless task. Carter, why are you still sitting here? Take this file down to legal. Carter, the printer jammed. Fix it. Carter, I need 10 copies of last quarter's financial report. Now. Marcus had no way to refuse. He glanced at the clock, 6 p.m., and he still hadn't touched his actual work. Trapped, 3 days passed. Marcus sat in the intern workroom, dark circles under his eyes from sleepless nights. The screen in front of him was blank, no data, nothing to present in the morning. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. How was he supposed to analyze something that nobody even cared about? Emily walked by, glanced at his screen, then stopped. You okay? She asked softly. Marcus exhaled deeply, leaning back in his chair. No, I have nothing. I can't work when I spend all day running errands. Emily glanced around before pulling up a chair. Collins doesn't want you to succeed, she said bluntly. Marcus let out a dry laugh. I know. Emily hesitated, then pulled out her phone, opening a financial app. Here's a trick, she said. If you don't have access to internal data, try the open market. There are some public platforms that might help. Marcus blinked and leaned in as Emily scrolled through a financial analysis site showing historical trading data. He held his breath. This could work. Emily nodded and stood up. Don't let Collins beat you too soon. Marcus watched her walk away, a renewed sense of determination rising within him. He turned back to his screen, opened the website, and started working. No matter how much they tried to push him down, he wouldn't let them take this chance away from him. Marcus sat quietly at his small desk, flipping through pages of market data. Unlike the other interns, he wasn't given a list of potential clients. But that didn't mean he was going to give up. If no one handed him an opportunity, he would create one himself. He began studying overlooked stocks, those that had slept for years, ignored by the market, only to suddenly surge at an astonishing rate. He searched for historical patterns, delving into special cases, companies that were once unknown but became overnight sensations. Every night, when the other interns had gone home, Marcus remained under the dim office lights. The glow of his computer screen reflected in his determined eyes. He carefully noted down every detail, analyzed each number, and structured his report to be as feasible as possible. His eyes were swollen from lack of sleep, his hands covered in scribbled notes, but he didn't stop. As the presentation day approached, Marcus pushed himself harder. He sought out secondary data sources, called independent analysts, and even browsed financial forums for signals that could reinforce his argument. Sometimes he had to run from one office to another to ask for additional information, only to receive cold stares or curt rejections. But he remained undeterred. Jake and Emily noticed his efforts. One night, Jake walked past and saw Marcus still glued to his screen at nearly 11 o'clock. You're still here? Jake asked, his voice tinged with surprise. Yeah, if I don't do this properly, I won't get a second chance, Marcus replied, eyes never leaving the chart he was analyzing. Emily placed a cup of coffee on his desk. If they're trying to make you fail, the only way to respond is to make sure they can't ignore you. Finally, the presentation day arrived. Marcus stepped onto the stage, gripping his report tightly. Though nervous, he remained composed. He had prepared for this moment, not to impress Collins, but to prove that he belonged here. He took a deep breath, looked directly at the executives and interns seated below, and spoke clearly. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to present an investment portfolio that I believe the market has overlooked. These stocks have a history of sudden surges, with indicators showing strong recovery potential. If invested in correctly, they could yield significant returns. The atmosphere in the room shifted. A few interns looked up, intrigued. Some managers frowned, flipping through Marcus's report. Even the skeptics couldn't deny the fluency and logic in his presentation. An older executive nodded slightly, skimming through the document in his hand. Your figures are quite interesting. Some companies do follow the growth pattern you've analyzed. Another chimed in, but investing in these stocks is still highly risky. Why should we believe this time will yield similar results? Marcus kept his voice steady. Sir, the market always presents opportunities that the majority overlook. These companies have solid foundations. They just haven't been leveraged correctly. If you examine closely, you'll see signs of capital flowing back in. But Collins was different. He folded his arms, a mocking smirk on his face. As Marcus finished his presentation, Collins slowly stood up and clapped sarcastically. Very impressive, Carter. I must admit, you have a persuasive way of speaking. But I'm not interested in pretty theories on paper. If you want to prove that these stocks have real value, great. Find a client willing to invest in them. Otherwise, your presentation is nothing but useless theory. The room fell silent. Some interns looked at Marcus with concern, while others seemed entertained, waiting to see how he would react. An intern nearby scoffed. Find an investor? Good luck, Carter. Even those with strong connections here struggled to convince anyone to invest in those stocks. Emily frowned and turned to Collins. Finding investors isn't an intern's responsibility. He already delivered an excellent presentation, so why throw another obstacle in his way? Collins raised an eyebrow, feigning indifference. If he's so confident, then he won't need help, right? Or maybe he just talks a good game but can't actually deliver. Jake spoke up cautiously. Honestly, the data Marcus presented has merit. We've seen stocks that were once considered worthless suddenly explode. I think he deserves a real chance. And another intern laughed mockingly. A real chance? Does he have any contacts? A VIP client list, maybe? Or is he planning to go door to door selling stocks? Suddenly, another executive spoke up, his voice calm and measured. The real question is whether Collins is issuing a legitimate challenge or simply trying to push Carter into a corner. If the analysis is solid, we should assess its feasibility rather than making it unnecessarily difficult for him. The room tensed. Some interns fell silent, while others watched Marcus as if he were a fool for accepting this challenge. Emily turned to Marcus, her voice low but resolute. You don't need to prove anything to Collins. Everyone here saw that your presentation was excellent. Marcus took a deep breath. I know, but I'm going to do more than that. I'll find an investor. A few murmurs rippled through the room. Some snickered, while others appeared genuinely surprised by Marcus's resolve. Collins clasped his hands behind his back, nodding as if enjoying the unfolding drama. Then you better get started. Time doesn't wait for anyone, Carter. The next day, Marcus buried himself in a mountain of work, the pressure of finding a client weighing on him like a dark cloud. Despite his best efforts, by the end of the day, he still had no clear plan. The task seemed impossible, and the more he thought about it, the heavier it felt. As if things weren't bad enough, Collins never missed an opportunity to make them worse. Throughout the day, he kept making snide remarks, occasionally stopping by Marcus's desk just to provoke him. Still no investors, Carter? Time's running out. Maybe you should start packing your things, Collins sneered, his voice loud enough for the other interns to hear. A few chuckled, while others avoided Marcus's gaze, not wanting to get involved. Marcus clenched his jaw, refusing to give Collins the satisfaction of seeing him waver. Late that evening, after a long and exhausting day, Marcus dragged himself to the coffee station to grab a cup to keep himself awake. But as he arrived, he froze. On the counter sat a cup of coffee with a sticky note attached. The scribbled words sent a cold shiver down his spine. Coffee for the black guy. Marcus stiffened. For a long moment, he just stared at the words, feeling a mixture of anger, humiliation, and disbelief. He had thought things like this belonged in the past, relics of a bygone era. But right here on Wall Street, he was reminded that no matter how hard he worked, there would always be people trying to push him down. He swallowed hard, forcing back the wave of disappointment rising inside him. Just surviving here was exhausting enough, but there were still those who weren't content with competition. They wanted to tear others apart. Feeling drained, Marcus left the break room and headed to the restroom to splash cold water on his face, trying to shake off the heavy feeling. As he stood there, gripping the sink, staring at his weary reflection, a familiar voice spoke behind him. Tough couple of days? Marcus turned to see Richard Sterling, the CEO he had met on his first day. The older man studied him with sharp eyes, though they carried an air of quiet concern. Marcus straightened his posture, forcing a small smile. Yeah, you could say that. It's been challenging, but I'm adapting and working hard. Sterling nodded, leaning slightly against the sink. I watched your presentation. You took an angle no one else thought of. Very impressive. Marcus blinked, surprised. You saw my presentation? Sterling smirked. Of course, I keep an eye on promising talent. Your analysis was sharp, but more importantly, you showed creative thinking. But tell me, have you tried approaching this challenge differently, thinking about it from an entirely new perspective? Marcus frowned, contemplating his words. Then suddenly a memory flashed in his mind. Collins mocking him during the presentation. What's next? Are you going door to door selling stocks? A wild idea sparked in Marcus's mind. He inhaled sharply. Maybe I've been looking at this the wrong way. Sterling nodded approvingly, his eyes glinting with intrigue. Sometimes the answer isn't where everyone else is looking. Real investors aren't always the ones sitting in high-rise offices. Think about it. Where else could you look? Marcus was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. Maybe I've been limiting my thinking to traditional boundaries. Maybe the opportunity isn't with the people everyone else is targeting. Sterling chuckled lightly. Now you understand. Sometimes the market isn't just in boardrooms, it's in the places we least expect. I trust you'll figure it out. Marcus looked at his reflection once more. This time he no longer saw exhaustion and frustration, only determination. He turned to Sterling, his eyes blazing with newfound resolve. Thank you, sir. I won't waste this opportunity. Sterling gave him a small smile, then patted his shoulder. Go make it happen. Marcus nodded firmly, then without a second's hesitation turned and strode out of the restroom. His exhaustion momentarily forgotten, his mind brimming with ideas. He had a plan, and he was going to prove them all wrong. Marcus sat quietly at his small desk, flipping through pages of market data. Unlike the other interns, he was not given a list of potential clients. But that didn't mean he would give up. If no one handed him an opportunity, he would create one for himself. He began researching overlooked stocks, those that had been asleep, ignored by the market for years, only to suddenly skyrocket at an astonishing rate. He searched for historical patterns, delving into special cases, companies that were once unknown but suddenly became overnight sensations. History always repeats itself, he murmured, eyes glued to the screen. Marcus called them unicorn stocks, those that had been neglected, unnoticed, but when the right opportunity arose, they surged spectacularly. He believed that if he could identify one before the market recognized its true value, it would be the key to achieving massive returns. But he knew that numbers alone weren't enough. To turn his idea into reality, he needed clients willing to take risks, people who were ready to bet and test their luck. So Marcus left his desk behind, stepping away from the dry reports of the office. He went to where real investors gathered, golf courses, financial exhibitions, and high-level networking events. There were no flashing stock tickers or tense boardroom meetings, just casual conversations over green fairways and firm handshakes in elegant conference halls. The first time Marcus stepped into an exclusive golf club, he felt like he had entered a different world. Around him were wealthy entrepreneurs and top investors, laughing and discussing the market while enjoying their perfect swings. Marcus approached the small bar, ordered a glass of water, and observed. A group of investors stood nearby, chatting about an emerging startup. He took a deep breath, moved closer, and positioned himself to overhear their conversation. Interesting. That company reminds me of another case. Tesla stock before it exploded, he remarked casually. The group turned to look at him. A silver-haired man in a white polo shirt raised an eyebrow. Who are you, I am? Marcus smiled, keeping his tone steady. Marcus Carter, intern at Sterling and Company. I'm researching unicorn stocks, overlooked stocks with massive growth potential. Another man in the group, wearing a black suit, crossed his arms and stared at Marcus. And you think you can identify those stocks? Marcus didn't flinch. Not all of them. But I believe that if we capture the right moment, we can pinpoint the stocks that will change the game. And history has shown that this has happened before. The silver-haired man nodded thoughtfully. An intern analyzing stocks like this? Not bad. The man in the black suit smirked. Would you bet on this, Marcus? Without hesitation, Marcus replied, if I had the capital, I'd invest immediately. But what I do have is persistence and vision. I just need to find the right person who believes in that. The group chuckled, but this time it wasn't mocking. It was recognition. Marcus didn't stop at casual conversations. He actively approached each potential investor, presenting a bold approach. I know you usually invest in established stocks, but breakthrough profits often come from places no one expects. I want you to consider this portfolio. I'm not asking for an immediate commitment, just to listen. And if I'm wrong, I'll step back immediately. Some people scoffed. Others looked intrigued. But Marcus didn't waver. He knew that to convince them, he had to demonstrate his knowledge and perseverance. At a financial exhibition, Marcus faced another challenge. He happened to overhear a heated debate between two major investors. One argued that AI technology would completely reshape the market, while the other insisted that real estate remained the safest investment. Marcus stepped closer and spoke carefully. I think both of you are right, but if we only focus on the present, we'll miss future opportunities. The most important question is, do we want to invest in something stable or something with explosive potential? One of the men turned around, observing Marcus for a long moment before asking, where do you work? Marcus flashed a confident smile. Intern at Sterling and Company? The man nodded, a hint of interest in his eyes. An intern with this kind of approach? Impressive. I'll remember your name. Marcus knew he was on the right track. He continued expanding his network, not only building a contact list, but also engaging in debates, counter-arguments, and sharp analyses. He understood that what made an investor decide wasn't just numbers. It was faith in the person presenting the opportunity. Then one day his phone buzzed. A message from one of the investors he had reached out to. Marcus, I'd like to hear more about your idea. Let's meet tomorrow morning. Marcus stared at the screen, his heart pounding. The opportunity he had been waiting for had finally arrived. He took a deep breath, a confident smile forming. Finally, it's time to prove myself. That day, Marcus stood in front of the mirror, carefully adjusting his tie. Today was an important day. He was about to meet his first client, an experienced and well-funded investor. His suit wasn't high-end, but he had meticulously pressed every crease. He needed to make the best impression possible. Just as he stepped out of the office, Marcus suddenly felt something catch his foot. A strong force tripped him, sending him sprawling onto the floor in front of a group of other interns. His important documents scattered everywhere. His glasses fell to the ground and shattered. A chuckle came from Andrew Collins, the internship manager, his eyes gleaming with mockery. "Oh, careful there, Carter. Wall Street can be dangerous for the clumsy." Another intern folded his arms and smirked. "What a shame. Who goes to meet a client with broken glasses? You look more like a beggar trying to sell stocks." Laughter erupted, filled with malice. Marcus clenched his jaw, his hands tightening into fists until his knuckles turned white. He wanted to retaliate, to say something that would shut them up. But he knew better than to play into their games. Instead, he took a deep breath, focusing on picking up his scattered documents. Collins shrugged, smirking as he walked away, leaving Marcus to endure the mix of pity and ridicule from the other interns. But the incident had cost him precious time. By the time he left the office, he was nearly late for his meeting. With no other option, he called the client while hurrying to the meeting location. When he arrived, Marcus was slightly out of breath, hastily straightening his slightly disheveled attire. He spotted his first potential client, a middle-aged man standing next to a sleek luxury car. The man glanced at his watch before turning to Marcus with an unimpressed expression. "You're late," he stated bluntly, irritation evident in his voice. Marcus swallowed hard, forcing himself to remain calm. "I sincerely apologize," he responded quickly, bowing his head slightly. "Something unexpected happened, but I assure you I won't waste any more of your time. If you don't mind, I can present my analysis right now in your car while you head to your next destination. That way I can explain everything while we're on the move." The man raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by the suggestion. After a moment, he smirked and nodded. "All right, but you have exactly 30 minutes. If you haven't convinced me by then, don't expect a second meeting." Marcus didn't hesitate. He opened his briefcase. Despite his broken glasses, he focused on the numbers and charts. As the car pulled away, he launched into his analysis of the potential stocks he had identified. Currently, there are several stocks the market has overlooked, but they follow a growth pattern similar to previous breakout stocks. Take this one, for example. 3 months ago, no one cared about it, but based on fundamental indicators and investment flow, it's on track for a strong surge. Marcus flipped open a chart, pointing at a critical point. 10 minutes passed. The man remained silent, simply observing Marcus. But instead of the initial disinterest, a flicker of curiosity appeared in his eyes. "You're saying this stock will follow a pattern similar to Tesla in its early days?" the man asked, skepticism still present, but no longer mocking. Marcus nodded. "Exactly. I'm not saying it will become Tesla, but if you look at the growth trend, this is a highly promising entry point. And here," he turned another page, continuing his presentation. "We can see that the stock's trading volume has been steadily increasing over the past few weeks. It hasn't peaked yet, but there are signals that smart money is flowing in. If we wait until the market realizes its value, we'll miss the best opportunity." 20 minutes passed. The man nodded slightly as Marcus presented a key example, his hand resting on his chin in deep thought. "If I invest, what's my risk?" Marcus answered immediately, without hesitation. "Every investment has risks, but I've analyzed factors that help mitigate them." He pointed at a specific number. "This is a strong support level formed from previous trading sessions. If the price drops below this, you can exit with minimal loss. But if it breaks through this resistance level, your returns could double or even triple." 30 minutes passed. Just as Marcus finished his analysis, the man suddenly burst into laughter. "You're quite something. Who meets a client looking like this? Disheveled, broken glasses, and pitching stocks like they're running a race." Marcus chuckled along. "I believe the stock market doesn't judge people by appearance, but by what they can deliver. Besides, I believe I just met your time requirement." The man smirked again, nodding in approval. "You're different. I like your spirit, Marcus. I'll invest in this stock based on your analysis. But remember, don't keep me waiting next time." Marcus exhaled in relief, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "I won't let that happen again. Thank you for giving me this opportunity." As the car came to a stop, Marcus stepped out, but something immediately felt off. The buildings around him didn't resemble anything on Wall Street. When he glanced at a street sign, his eyes widened. "Wait, this isn't New York," he murmured. The man laughed from inside the car. "Good luck, kid. Next time, double-check your destination." Marcus shook his head, chuckling at himself. "I guess I learned another lesson today. But for now, looks like I need to find a bus stop." He turned and walked away, feeling more energized than ever. His first client meeting wasn't perfect, but it was a win. And for Marcus, that was all that mattered. Not long after, the stock skyrocketed exactly as Marcus had predicted. The news spread quickly, and his first client couldn't contain his excitement. The moment he saw the profit figures in the report, he burst into laughter and clapped Marcus hard on the back. "Kid, you really did it. I've never seen someone close their first deal with such vision," he exclaimed, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "Do you know how many people on Wall Street laughed when I said I was investing in that stock? Now they're all biting their nails in regret." Marcus chuckled, unable to hide the satisfaction rising within him. "I just relied on data and a bit of intuition, sir, but without your trust, I wouldn't have had this opportunity." The man folded his arms and shook his head, still grinning. "Trust? Don't be ridiculous. You don't need anyone to trust you, you just need to prove yourself right." And you did. Without hesitation, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Hey, I'm sitting here with a young guy who's got real potential. He just made me a solid profit. You want an investment advisor with vision? Meet him immediately." Marcus was stunned when his first client not only expressed satisfaction, but eagerly introduced him to other major investors. Within a week, he had a series of new meetings scheduled, people who had heard about the intern who discovered the unicorn stock. Gradually, Marcus adapted to the fast pace of Wall Street. Every morning, he walked into the office with growing confidence, working tirelessly, making calls, attending events, and expanding his network. He understood that in this world, only results determined who truly mattered. After a month of relentless effort, Marcus started gaining serious recognition. Not only was he ranked as the top-performing intern in the brokerage division, but he also secured a major contract with a wealthy investor from Dubai, a deal that even full-time employees had never been able to land. The name Marcus Carter started appearing more frequently in internal meetings and performance reports. Those who once dismissed him were now forced to see him in a new light. When the latest performance report was sent to the executive board, Richard Sterling personally called Marcus into his office. Marcus stepped in, his heartbeat quickening, but his gaze steady. Sterling sat there holding the report, his expression filled with satisfaction. "You've done an outstanding job, Marcus," he said in a deep, steady voice. "I've always believed that real talent isn't defined by background or degrees, but by effort and intelligence." Marcus allowed himself a slight smile. He knew that what he had achieved today wasn't luck. It was the result of countless hours of relentless studying and hard work. No one could deny Marcus's success anymore. Andrew Collins, the internship manager who had once tried to sabotage him, now had no choice but to accept the truth. Marcus Carter had proven he belonged. A few days later, in a company-wide meeting, an official announcement was made. Marcus Carter was now officially hired at Sterling and Company. The entire trading floor buzzed with discussions. Some congratulated him, some were shocked, but everyone knew he had achieved something that few expected. At that very moment, the stock market erupted. The stock Marcus had recommended continued to skyrocket. Numbers soared across the screens, and investors scrambled to buy in, pushing its value to a record high. The trading floor was filled with cheers, firm handshakes, and groans of regret from those who had missed the golden opportunity. The name Marcus Carter was no longer just that of an exceptional intern. He had become a force to be reckoned with. Those who once mocked him now stood in silent admiration, their expressions shifting from skepticism to respect. Not long after, Andrew Collins, the very man who had ridiculed and hindered Marcus, appeared at his desk. This time there was no smug grin or mocking tone. Collins looked uneasy, his eyes carrying a hint of embarrassment. "Marcus, I need to talk," Collins said, his tone slower than usual. "I was wrong about you. I let my biases cloud my judgment of your true ability. I want to apologize." Marcus looked at the man who had once been his greatest obstacle. A part of him wanted to dismiss the apology outright, but he knew that sometimes forgiveness was more powerful than victory. He stood up and extended his hand. "I don't hold grudges. Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what we learn from them." Collins hesitated for a moment, then shook Marcus's hand, a genuine handshake, free of arrogance. The employees around them witnessed the moment, understanding that Marcus Carter hadn't just won in business. He had won over people. Looking out from his new office window, Marcus gazed down at the bustling streets of Wall Street. Many like him, once underestimated, were still fighting to prove themselves. But now he was no longer just another nameless intern. His phone buzzed, an unknown number. Marcus, I have a new opportunity that I think you'll like. Meet me at the Empire Club at 7 p.m. Don't disappoint me. Marcus smirked. Another opportunity had arrived. And this time he wasn't just chasing them. He was creating them. Because sometimes a simple act of kindness in the rain could lead to a life-changing opportunity. But for Marcus Carter, this was only the beginning.